The grand hall of the Varan Empire sparkled like 1,000 suns. The floor was made of silverstone that reflected the light of the twin moons, and the air smelled of rare flowers brought from distant worlds. Every noble in the empire had gathered there, their long robes and bright jewels turning the hall into a living rainbow. At the center of it all stood Princess Lysera of House Thalrin, the most beautiful and most feared royal in the galaxy. Her violet scales shimmered softly under the light, and her golden eyes were filled with something she had never felt before: fear. Her long tail curled nervously around her leg. The heavy crown on her head felt colder than ever, because today she was to be matched to a human. A ripple of whispers moved through the alien crowd. The words human and primitive and dangerous spread like wind through the hall. "They are warborn," someone hissed. "They come from a dying world of fire," said another. "How could the Emperor agree to such shame?" Lysera heard them all. She tried to hold her head high, but her heart was pounding. She had seen images of humans, rough, loud, emotional creatures from a small blue planet called Earth. Their wars had nearly destroyed them, yet they survived. They always survived. That frightened her more than anything. And then, the great doors opened. A sound of marching echoed across the hall. The guards stepped aside. In walked Captain Elias Ward, the human representative wearing a dark uniform with a single silver emblem on his chest. He was tall for a human, but still smaller than any Varan noble. His skin was pale, his eyes deep brown, and there was a quiet strength in the way he moved. He looked calm, even when thousands of alien eyes stared at him with suspicion and disgust. He stopped before the throne and bowed deeply. "It's an honor to stand before you, Your Majesty," he said to the Emperor. His voice was steady, respectful, and strangely gentle. The Emperor did not reply. His golden armor gleamed as he studied the human like a weapon on display. "You understand what this bond means, human?" he asked coldly. Elias nodded once. "I do, my lord. It is a bridge between our worlds." Lysera stood beside her father, her body stiff. When she looked at Elias, she saw no pride, no arrogance, only calm determination. And that confused her. She expected him to look at her like a prize, but instead, he lowered his eyes in respect. "Step forward," said the high priest. Elias took a slow step closer. The princess hesitated, her throat dry. As part of the ceremony, their hands had to touch, just for a moment to seal the diplomatic bond. She lifted her delicate hand, shimmering with tiny scales. He raised his own, strong, warm, and human. The hall grew silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. When their hands met, Lysera felt a spark, not pain, not fear, but something unexpected. His skin was warm, almost alive with emotion. His hand was careful, as if he was afraid to hurt her. No one had ever touched her like that before. She expected her body to recoil, but it didn't. She found herself staring at him, searching his face for something cruel, but there was none. "Only kindness," Elias smiled faintly. "Your Highness," he whispered, "I promise I mean no harm." The words were simple, but they sank deep into her heart. No one had ever spoken to her so softly, not even her own people. The priest completed the ceremony. The golden light from the crystal orb surrounded their joined hands, and the crowd gasped as the bond mark appeared, a symbol of unity glowing faintly on their skin. Lysera quickly pulled her hand back, her face flushed. She felt everyone's gaze on her, but her eyes remained fixed on the human. He didn't look proud. He didn't smirk. He just nodded respectfully and stepped back. The Emperor rose from his throne and declared, "The bond is complete. The alliance between Varan and humanity is sealed." Applause broke out, but it was cold, forced, and hollow. The nobles bowed only because they were told to. Lysera's chest tightened. She wanted to disappear. When the ceremony ended, Elias turned to leave, but for one last moment he looked back at her. His eyes held no command, no hunger, only a strange, quiet sadness. Lysera's heart skipped. She didn't know why. That night, when she returned to her chambers, she couldn't sleep. She looked at the faint glowing mark on her wrist, the sign of her new human match. The galaxy had expected her to be disgusted, to hate him, but all she could think about was how his voice had sounded when he said those words, "I mean no harm." For the first time in her royal life, Princess Lysera wondered if humans were not the monsters the stories claimed they were. And for the first time, she felt something strange, a small, fragile hope. Days turned into weeks after the ceremony. The palace remained grand and alive, but for Princess Lysera, it felt quieter than ever. She had been bound to Captain Elias Ward, the human soldier, yet they lived like strangers in two different worlds. He stayed in the west wing of the palace, where the royal guards trained. His quarters were simple: a small room, a narrow bed, a desk with old paper books, and a window that looked out to the twin moons. He never asked for more. Lysera, on the other hand, lived in her royal chambers filled with gold, silk, and jewels. But lately, even surrounded by beauty, she felt restless. Every corner of her room reminded her of duty, not life. Sometimes she thought about that moment during the ceremony: his hand, his voice, his eyes. The galaxy had told her humans were wild, selfish, and dangerous, yet the humans she met seemed calm, careful, and kind. It confused her heart more than she wanted to admit. One morning, while walking through the garden of silver-leafed trees, Lysera noticed something strange. The small repair drones that took care of the flowers had been fixed. Their wings had been bent for months, but now they fluttered perfectly again. Her maid bowed and said softly, "The human repaired them, Princess." "He refused assistance," Lysera frowned. "Why would he do that?" "He said broken things deserve a second chance," the maid replied. That night she stood on her balcony and looked toward the west wing. From her height she could see a faint light flickering in his window. He was reading again, quietly under the stars. She hesitated, then turned away. But something in her heart whispered to stay. The next day, fate brought them face to face again. She was in the royal garden when she saw him walking through, carrying a set of tools and cleaning a training drone. When he noticed her, he bowed quickly. "Your Highness," Lysera nodded, unsure what to say. Her voice came out softer than she expected. You fixed the garden drones." He smiled slightly. "They weren't too damaged. Just needed patience." "Patience?" she asked, tilting her head. Elias wiped the grease from his hands. "Where I come from, Princess, patience fixes more things than war ever did." She didn't know how to respond. The Varen Empire believed in strength, not patience. Her people ruled through fear, not kindness. Yet here was a human soldier speaking of peace like it was something real. "Why are you here, Elias?" she asked suddenly. "What do you truly want from this bond?" He met her gaze without fear. "Peace," he said simply, "for both our worlds." His words carried no pride, no hidden agenda. They sounded like truth. She wanted to believe him, but her heart still carried the weight of her people's warnings. Humans were unpredictable, dangerous, emotional. Still, she couldn't ignore what she saw in him. That evening, she found herself walking toward the west wing. She told herself it was only curiosity, but deep down, she knew it was more. She stopped outside his quarters and saw him through the open door. He was sitting by the window, writing something in a small book. "What are you doing?" she asked softly. Elias turned, startled, but quickly stood. "Princess." "I didn't hear you approach. I asked what you're writing." He smiled awkwardly. "Letters. To no one, really, just thoughts." Lysera stepped closer. "Humans write their thoughts?" "Sometimes," he said, "it helps to make sense of what's in here." He tapped his chest. "The heart doesn't always listen to reason." She looked at the notebook, then at him. "We Varen keep our thoughts inside. Showing emotion is weakness." Elias shook his head. "On Earth, it's the opposite. Hiding emotion is what destroys us." For a long moment they stood in silence, only the sound of the wind filling the space. Lysera finally said, "Do you hate being here among us?" He looked out at the night sky. "No, I don't hate peace. It's just lonely sometimes." Something inside her shifted. She had been lonely too, even surrounded by her people. Maybe loneliness wasn't about being alone. Maybe it was about not being understood. She hesitated before speaking again. "If you are lonely, Captain, you may walk the royal gardens any time you wish. They are quiet." Elias looked surprised, then smiled warmly. "Thank you, Princess. I'd like that." She turned to leave, but before she stepped out, she looked back once more. He was still standing there, looking at the stars with a peaceful expression. That night, when she lay in bed, she thought of his words again. "I don't hate peace." In a galaxy full of war and pride, his simple words felt like light in the dark. For the first time in her life, Princess Lysera began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the distance between human and Varen hearts wasn't as far as the stars made it seem. The morning sun rose over the capital city of Varen Prime, turning the crystal towers gold. It was a day of peace, or so everyone thought. Princess Lysera's convoy was set to visit the border world of Varath, a planet known for its mixed colonies of Varen, humans, and other species. It was supposed to be a friendly visit, a show of unity between their two peoples. Elias had volunteered to go with her. "It's my duty to protect the princess," he told the Emperor's council firmly. Some of them protested, but no one could argue against his calm determination. When the royal cruiser landed on Varath's surface, Lysera stepped out in her royal robe, her violet scales glimmering in the sunlight. Elias followed her, wearing light armor and carrying his plasma rifle. Around them, the air was warm and filled with the scent of sand and metal. For the first hour, everything was perfect. The people cheered, the banners waved, and the peace talks began in a marble courtyard surrounded by fountains. Lysera smiled politely, though her eyes often drifted toward the human standing nearby. Elias watched every shadow, every movement, alert but calm. Then it happened. A sudden blast shattered the courtyard. The fountains exploded, throwing water and stone into the air. Screams echoed as smoke filled the sky. "Rebels masked and armed rushed from the rooftops. Get down!" Elias shouted, pulling Lysera behind a marble wall as plasma fire tore through the air. Her heart pounded, her mind spinning in terror. Her guards returned fire, but they were outnumbered. The rebels' weapons were advanced, military grade. "Someone had planned this. Who are they?" she cried. Elias gritted his teeth. "Not your concern right now, princess." "Stay low." He fired carefully, every shot precise, covering her and the injured guards. One of the rebels threw a grenade. Elias dove forward, grabbed it, and flung it back before it could detonate. The explosion tore through the far side of the square, shaking the ground. Lysera's breathing grew shallow. Her body trembled. She had seen battles before from afar, but never this close. The heat, the screams, the blood, it was unbearable. Then as she tried to stand, a plasma bolt streaked past and grazed her side. The pain burned like fire. She fell with a cry, clutching her ribs. Her vision blurred. Elias turned instantly. "Lysera!" He rushed to her side, kneeling. His armor was scorched, his cheek bleeding, but he didn't care. He pressed his hand against her wound, his voice firm but gentle. "Stay with me. You'll be okay. Just breathe." Her voice shook. You're bleeding." He smiled faintly, trying to keep her calm. "So are you. Guess we match now." Another explosion shook the courtyard. Elias looked up, eyes sharp. More rebels were coming. He couldn't leave her here. He lifted her into his arms, ignoring the burning pain in his shoulder. Plasma fire cut through the smoke as he ran toward a broken transport carrier. Guards shouted behind him, trying to cover them. "Captain, you'll get killed," one cried. Elias didn't stop. "Not today." Lysera's head rested against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, fast, strong, alive. She wanted to tell him to leave her, to save himself, but her voice was weak. "You'll die," she whispered. He looked down at her, his jaw set. "Not while you're still breathing." He reached the carrier, kicked open the door, and set her gently on the seat. Plasma bolts struck the hull, but he ignored them, starting the engines with shaking hands. Come on," he muttered. The carrier roared to life, lifting off the ground. The last thing Lysera remembered before losing consciousness was Elias's voice shouting into the comms. "This is Captain Ward. The princess is injured, requesting immediate evac." When she woke again, the world was quiet. The air smelled clean. She was in the palace infirmary, lying on a soft bed. Her side was bandaged and her body ached. A shadow moved beside her. It was Elias. His armor was gone, replaced by a medical tunic, and his right arm was wrapped in bandages. He looked exhausted but alive. "You're awake," he said softly, relief in his eyes. "How do you feel?" Lysera blinked at him, her throat dry. "You saved me." He smiled faintly. "That's my job." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. "You could have died." He shrugged lightly. "Maybe. But humans do stupid things for people they care about." Her heart trembled. She didn't know what to say. No one in her life had ever risked themselves for her. Not her guards, not her nobles, not even her father. But this human, this stranger from another world, had faced death without hesitation. She reached out weakly and touched his hand. "Thank you." "Elias." He squeezed her fingers gently. "Rest now, princess. You're safe." As her eyes closed again, she thought of his words echoing in her heart. Humans do stupid things for people they care about. It was foolish. It was reckless, but to her, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. Days passed slowly after the attack. The palace, once filled with music and laughter, now echoed with quiet footsteps and worried whispers. Princess Lysera spent her recovery in her private healing chamber. Soft blue light filled the room, soothing her wound. But what truly helped her heal wasn't the medicine. It was the person who came to see her every day, Elias. Despite his own injuries, he refused to stay in the medical wing. Every morning he brought her tea from the gardens and stood by her side, calm and gentle. He spoke little, but when he did, his voice carried warmth. At first, Lysera didn't know how to act around him. She was a princess trained to hide her emotions. Yet every time she looked at the human sitting quietly beside her bed, she felt her walls slowly begin to fall. One afternoon, she looked at him and asked softly, "Why did you save me that day?" Elias smiled faintly. "Because you were in danger." "But you could have died," she whispered. He looked at her with calm eyes. "Maybe, but what kind of man would I be if I didn't try?" Lysera lowered her gaze, her chest tightening. In her world, no one risked their life without reason. Everything was political, strategic. Yet Elias had acted from the heart, not from duty. It made no sense, and yet it made her feel something she couldn't name. After a few more days, she was strong enough to walk again. The first place she went was the moonlit garden, her favorite spot in the palace. The silver trees glowed under the light of the twin moons, and the air smelled of soft crystal flowers. When she entered, she found Elias already there, standing near the fountain. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "Princess," he said politely, bowing slightly. She smiled. "You knew I'd come here," he nodded. "It's the only place that looks peaceful enough for you." They sat near the fountain together. For a while, neither spoke. The sound of water and the hum of night insects filled the silence. Then Elias looked up at the stars. "Back on Earth," he said quietly. "I used to watch the sky every night. We only have one moon. But even that was enough to remind me that there's beauty left in the universe." Lysera turned to him, her golden eyes soft. "And what do you see now when you look at our sky?" He smiled. "I see a reason to keep believing in peace." She blinked slowly. "Peace," she repeated almost like a question. "Yes," he said. "I've seen too much war, Princess. Too many people fighting for pride, power, or fear. But kindness." He paused, looking at her. "Kindness can end wars before they even start." His words touched something deep inside her. All her life she had been taught that peace came through strength, not softness. But here was a human soldier speaking of peace like it was something precious, not weak. She asked softly, "Do all humans think like you?" He laughed lightly. "No. Some would call me foolish. But maybe it takes fools to keep hope alive." Lysera smiled, a real one this time. "Then perhaps the galaxy needs more fools." For the first time they laughed together. After that night they began meeting often in the garden. Some days they talked about small things, the stars, the rain, or the strange food from their worlds. Other days they shared their stories. Elias told her about his home, about Earth's blue oceans and green forests, about the sound of rain on rooftops. Lysera listened with wide eyes, imagining a world so alive. She told him about the palace, her childhood under constant watch, the pressure of being perfect. "I have never been allowed to make mistakes," she said quietly. "Even my smiles were planned." Elias looked at her gently. "Then maybe it's time someone let you be yourself." She met his eyes, and something inside her softened completely. From that evening onward, she began to change. Her voice grew lighter, her laughter more natural. When she walked through the palace, even her servants noticed the difference. The princess who once spoke like a statue now smiled like the dawn, and behind every one of those smiles was the human who had shown her that kindness was not weakness. It was strength. One night, as they sat under the twin moons, Lysera turned to him. "Elias," she said softly, "do you ever miss your world?" He looked up at the stars. "Every day. But sometimes when I'm here with you, it feels like I'm home again." Her breath caught. She wanted to look away, but his eyes held hers, steady and sincere. Neither spoke after that. The wind whispered through the silver leaves, carrying the scent of night flowers around them. And in that silence, something gentle bloomed between them, something fragile, beautiful and real. It wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't duty, it was trust. Peace never lasts long in a palace built on pride. For weeks, whispers had filled the golden halls. Servants spoke quietly behind closed doors. Nobles watched the gardens from balconies, their jeweled eyes filled with judgment. The word had spread across the empire, the human and the princess had grown close. To the people, it was scandal. To the emperor, it was betrayal. One evening, as the sun set in crimson light, Emperor Thalrin summoned his daughter to the throne room. The air was cold and heavy with silence. The walls, lined with banners of conquest, seemed to watch her as she entered. Lysera walked with her head held high, but her heart beat fast. The moment she saw her father's face, she knew something terrible was coming. His golden eyes burned with fury. "Do you know why I called you here?" His voice thundered. Lysera swallowed hard. "Because of the rumors, father." The emperor rose from his throne. His towering figure cast a long shadow across the floor. "Rumors," he hissed. "They are not rumors when my spies have seen you walking in the garden with that creature." Laughing, smiling, talking as if you were equals, Lysera's voice trembled. "He is not a creature, father. He saved my life."
Enough,"
the emperor roared, slamming his clawed hand on the armrest. The hall trembled. "You are a princess of Varen. You do not lower yourself to the level of a human soldier." Tears stung her eyes, but she stood her ground. "He is more honorable than half the nobles who bow before you." The emperor's expression turned cold as stone. "Do you dare defend him to me?" "Yes," she whispered. For a moment there was silence. Sharp, dangerous silence. Then the emperor spoke again, voice low and deadly. "Bring him in." 2 guards dragged Captain Elias Ward into the hall. His hands were bound behind his back, but he didn't resist. His face was calm, his eyes steady as they met Lysera's across the room. Her heart broke at the sight. "Father, what are you doing?" The emperor stepped down from his throne, circling Elias like a predator. "Do you know what you have done, human?" Elias stood tall. "I've done my duty. I protected your daughter." "You did more than that," the emperor growled. "You poisoned her mind. You made her forget who she is." "I never forced her," Elias said quietly. "She chose to see me as a person." "That's not poison, that's understanding." His calmness only made the emperor angrier. He turned to his daughter. "You will end this disgrace immediately. The bond will remain political only. You will never see him again." Lysera shook her head, tears falling freely now. "No, you can't command my heart. Your heart belongs to the empire." Her voice rose, full of pain. "And what good is an empire that cannot love?" The emperor froze for a second, just a second. But then his anger returned, stronger than ever.
Enough,
he roared. "Guards, take the human away. Exile him from this world. If he returns, he dies," Lysera screamed. "No!" She ran forward, trying to reach him, but the guards held her back. Elias didn't struggle. He looked at her, eyes soft and full of sorrow. "Don't cry, princess," he said gently. "You're stronger than this. I can't let them take you." She sobbed. He shook his head, his voice calm even as the guards pulled him away. Humans always find their way home, even through darkness. Those were his last words to her before the great doors closed. Lysera fell to her knees as his footsteps faded. The echo of the door slamming shut felt like her heart breaking in half. That night, the palace felt like a cage. Lysera tore the ornaments from her wrists and smashed her crown against the floor. "You've taken everything from me," she cried to the empty air. Outside her window, the stars burned silently. Somewhere among them, a human ship would carry Elias away, alone, exiled, his promise echoing in her mind. She sat by the window until dawn, staring at the sky. Every star looked like a memory of him. The warmth in his smile, the way he said her name, the way he looked at her as if she were not a princess but a person. When the first light touched her face, she whispered softly, "Elias, wherever you are, I'll find you again." And for the first time in her life, the Princess of Varen prayed, not to her gods, not to her father's empire, but to the stars themselves. She prayed for a human. 3 months had passed since Captain Elias Ward was taken from the palace. To the galaxy, it was nothing. To Princess Lysera, it was eternity. Every day she lived inside a cage of golden walls and cold silence. Her father forbade her from leaving the royal quarters. Guards followed her every step. Her laughter, her voice, even her hope. All seemed to vanish into the emptiness of the halls. But deep in her heart, one thing refused to die, his memory. At night, she would stand by her window, watching the stars drift across the sky. Somewhere out there she imagined Elias alive, working, surviving, maybe even looking at the same stars. His promise echoed in her mind. Humans always find their way home, even through darkness. She held on to those words like a flame in winter. Far away, that flame still burned, inside Elias himself. Banished from Varen, he had been sent back to a human outpost on the edge of the frontier. The alien emperor thought he would disappear quietly, but humans never disappeared quietly. Elias had seen too much, felt too deeply. He knew the Varen Empire was breaking from inside. The people were starving while nobles drowned in luxury. The soldiers were losing faith. And behind it all, whispers spoke of rebellion. So when a secret message reached him from an unknown source, the princess is in danger. The emperor plans to use her in war. Elias didn't hesitate. He stole a small shuttle. Alone, armed only with his rifle and his courage, he set course for Varen once again. The empire was burning by the time he arrived. Rebel ships filled the night sky, firing red light across the capital's domes. The grand city that once glowed like gold now looked like a sea of fire. Elias landed in the shadow of the palace, smoke covering his descent. He moved like a ghost through the chaos, his heart pounding with one thought: find her. Inside, the palace was a war zone. Servants ran in fear, soldiers clashed in the halls, and the emperor's banners fell one by one. Elias fought through corridors, his body aching, his uniform torn, but he never stopped. He remembered every turn, every stair, because once he had walked these paths beside her. Finally, he reached the inner chamber, where the emperor held his last stand. Lysera stood at the center of the throne room, surrounded by guards. Her father's voice thundered, "You will obey me. You are my blood." She shook her head, tears shining in her eyes. "You've turned our people into prisoners. I won't be part of this anymore." Before the emperor could reply, the great doors burst open, smoke and light poured in, and through it stepped Elias Ward. For a moment, time froze. Lysera's breath caught in her throat. "Elias," she whispered. He looked at her, bruised, dirty, but alive, and gave a small, tired smile. "Told you, I'd find my way back," the emperor roared in rage. "You dare return here, human?" Elias raised his weapon, but didn't aim it. "I didn't come to fight you. I came to take her away from this madness. She belongs to her people." Elias' voice was calm but firm. "No, she belongs to herself." The emperor's eyes glowed with fury. "Then you both will die." He raised his blade, a long burning staff of energy, and charged. Elias met the attack head-on. The clash was brief but brutal. Sparks filled the air, metal screamed, and the floor cracked beneath their feet. The emperor was stronger, but Elias fought with something greater than strength. He fought with love. At last, with a desperate strike, Elias disarmed the emperor. The weapon clattered to the floor, but before Elias could finish it, Lysera stepped forward and stopped him. Her voice shook. "No more blood. Not even his." She turned to her father, her eyes full of sorrow. "You taught me to be proud, but pride without heart destroys everything. Look around, father. The empire is dying because it forgot how to feel." The emperor looked at her, broken and defeated. For the first time, his voice was small. "And what would you have me do, child?" Lysera took Elias's hand. "Let us go. Let the people choose their own peace." There was a long silence. Then slowly the emperor nodded. "Go then. But if you leave, you are no longer my daughter." Lysera squeezed Elias's hand tighter. "Then I'll just be Lysera. And that's enough." As they fled the burning palace together, the sons of Varen began to rise again, painting the smoke in gold and crimson. Elias looked at her, tears in his eyes. "You sure about this?" "There's no going back," she smiled softly. "I never wanted to go back. I just wanted to be free, with you." And as they boarded the stolen shuttle and flew into the morning light, two hearts, one human, one alien, left behind an empire of war and found something far greater. Not victory, not power, but love that even a galaxy couldn't chain. The stars stretched endlessly before them, silver trails of light scattered across the black ocean of space. The shuttle hummed softly as it drifted through the quiet between worlds. For the first time in many months, Princess Lysera, no longer a princess, just Lysera, felt peace. She sat beside Elias, watching his hands move across the controls. Every motion was calm, steady, sure. The same calm that had once comforted her in the palace gardens now surrounded her again. He glanced at her and smiled. "You're quiet. I'm just trying to believe this is real," she said softly. "After everything." "It's real," he replied, eyes gentle. "We made it out." Lysera looked out the window, her reflection faint against the stars. "We lost so much, Elias, my home, my people. My father." Elias nodded slowly. "I know. But sometimes to build something better, you have to leave the ruins behind." She turned to him, her eyes shimmering. "And what do we build now?" He smiled faintly. "Whatever we want." Days turned into weeks as they traveled from world to world, always staying a step ahead of the chaos that still shook the Varan Empire. But something miraculous was happening. The rebellion didn't die. It changed. Rumors spread across the stars of the princess who chose peace, and the human who fought for love instead of conquest. Soldiers began laying down their weapons. Worlds once enslaved under the empire began to unite, not in hatred but in hope. Their story became legend. People called them the bridge between worlds. But for Elias and Lysera, it wasn't legend. It was just life, quiet, uncertain, but filled with something stronger than power, understanding. They finally settled on a small green moon called Astra 9, a place of forests, rivers, and open skies. It wasn't much, but it was peaceful. They built a small home on a hill overlooking the valley. Lysera grew a garden of glowing flowers from her homeworld. Elias built a workshop beside the stream. Some nights they'd sit outside and watch the twin moons rise together, just like the twin sons of Varan once did. One evening, as the wind whispered through the trees, Lysera said softly, "Do you ever miss it? The war, the uniform, the duty?" Elias shook his head. "Not the war, but I miss the purpose. Then again, maybe I've found a better one." "What's that?" she asked, smiling. He reached out and brushed a strand of her silver hair behind her ear. "You." Her cheeks flushed softly in the moonlight. "You humans always say things so simply," she murmured. "Sometimes simple is all you need," he replied. She laughed quietly, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I used to think your kind was dangerous. Reckless, even foolish." He raised an eyebrow. "And now?" She smiled. "Now I think you're the bravest creatures in the stars." Months passed peacefully. But one day a ship appeared in their sky, an old Varan cruiser. It landed quietly in the field beyond the hill. Elias and Lysera watched from their porch as figures stepped out, Varan soldiers, carrying a white banner of peace. At their head was an older alien general with kind eyes. He bowed deeply. "Lady Lysera, the Emperor has abdicated. He sent us to find you." Lysera froze. "My father?" The general nodded. "He lives. He wishes to end the war." "He says you were right." Tears filled her eyes. For a long time she said nothing. Then she whispered, "He finally saw." The general smiled. "He asks you to return, not as a princess but as a voice of peace. The people listen to your name. They believe in you." Elias looked at her, silent, waiting for her choice. Lysera turned to him and took his hand. "If I go back, I won't go alone," she said firmly. The general bowed again. The emperor said, "The human is welcome too. You both are." And so, once again, they returned to the world they had fled. But this time, they came not as fugitives, but as symbols of something greater than either empire or race. The sight of the princess and the human standing together on the palace steps spread across the stars like fire in darkness. Worlds that had hated one another began to talk. Armies that had fought for centuries began to lay down their arms. Elias never sought glory. Lysera never sought power. Yet together, they gave the galaxy something it had long forgotten: hope. Years later, when they were old and the wars were nothing but stories, children across the stars would hear their tale. Teachers would say, "Once an alien princess trembled at her human match, but his kindness changed everything." And in the quiet of their home beneath twin suns, Lysera would look at Elias and whisper, "You kept your promise. You found your way home." He would smile, take her hand, and reply, "I didn't just find home, Lysera. I found you, and somewhere beyond the sky, the stars, ancient witnesses of their love, shined a little brighter, because they remembered the human and the princess who changed the galaxy not with weapons, but with kindness.